Hello?
Hello.
I've spoken to my boss. My boss was like, I should be careful. First of all, I'm a woman. I'm already worried. I don't think even...
What you're listening to is a call, secretly recorded in Kampala, Uganda, in February 2023. The woman on the line is anxious, hunched over her phone, trying to negotiate a deal.
I know this business is risky, but also for my safety, I'm already scared.
The reason she's nervous is because the kind of deal they're hashing out is against the law.
You know what we are doing is illegal.
Yeah, I know.
But there's no way you can survive in this Uganda if it is not through these deals.
It is true.
And this woman, she goes by the name Grace, knows how hard it can be to survive in Uganda, a country where it's not uncommon to earn less than $200 a month. She needs to make a living, just like everyone else. So she's gripping the phone, desperate to close this transaction.
You don't know how I'm broke. The way I need money to be in my pocket.
After some haggling, Grace and her contact reach an agreement.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
She puts down the phone, sighs in relief. The deal is on. And this man has walked right into her trap.
Yeah, my job here, I was deployed here as an investigator.
See, Grace isn't really a desperate trader of illicit products. That's just an act. In reality, she's a highly trained spy.
It's really nice, by the way, to be in power, to be in full power.
So who are her targets? Well, she investigates wildlife traffickers.
I know I'm an officer. I know I interrogate. I know I interview.
Grace's job goes like this. She needs to persuade criminals that she's a criminal too. Then, through calls and meetings like the one you just heard, she gets these traffickers to incriminate themselves.
I'm really confident. I think I'm tough.
In this case, she's successfully convinced the criminal. He thinks that she's going to buy from him
4 pieces of ivory and then 3 whole pangolin skins.
In reality, the trafficker will lead her right to the contraband, and themselves to a set of handcuffs. Now Grace needs to head into the slum where the ivory and pangolin scales are, and where a raid will happen. And to do that, she needs to get into disguise.
So I need to look like maybe I'm just a passerby.
To fit in the slum, Grace tosses her blazer to one side, pulls on a simple t-shirt over her dress, and crowns herself with a red satin bonnet. It's basically the hair equivalent of wearing your pajamas outside.
Need to look like a villager from that area also.
Transformation complete. When asked how she's feeling, she pats her chest. Like her heart is jumping out of her body.
Yeah, it's beating fast.
Thank you.
She runs down and out of the building, her sandals whacking the stairs like military drums before a battle. She hops onto the back of a boda boda, a motorbike taxi.
Naguru. Go down market.
And rides off into the distance. To the untrained eye, she's just another Ugandan woman, anonymous in the scrum of motorcycles that gives this city a constant hum. But really, she's a secret agent in a satin bonnet. I'm Runako Celina. I'm an investigative journalist and now a host of a podcast, this podcast, a show about the illegal wildlife trade. Me and my team have spent months poring over this topic. And ever since we started, I've tried to talk to people in my life about it. And I realized I've been having basically the same conversation over and over again. It goes like this. Someone asks me, what are you working on at the moment? And then I say, oh, investigating the illegal wildlife trade. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, and I sort of vaguely know what that is.
Things to do with elephants' tusks and things like that.
Illegal wildlife trade? And animals, right? Somewhere in Africa.
I don't know.
Typically, I get a slightly baffled look from the person I'm speaking with, so I get all preachy with them. I compare the illegal wildlife trade to drug smuggling, the same intoxicating wealth for the kingpins. But it's not heroin or cocaine on offer. No, it's gorillas, sea snails, rhino horns, and tiger bones. And then I'm like, it's not just animals' lives on the line here either. People are being killed too. But the main difference with drug smugglers? Wildlife traffickers are rarely prosecuted. I mean, this stuff is happening with almost impunity. And then I get responses like,
That is shocking. Really?
That seems incredible.
What the fuck? Seriously?
Wow.
Wow.
and you know what? I can't really blame them. In fact, before I set out on this investigation, I didn't really know a whole lot about the illegal wildlife trade either. Because in my career, the stories that have fascinated me are human stories. That's probably why I ended up in China and Malawi reporting on race and human exploitation. So, like me, you might be wondering how a human interest journalist ends up engrossed in the world of animals. Well, it started when I heard about wildlife espionage. Spies. People like Grace who go into these high-octane, high-risk situations trying to take out wildlife traffickers. And at first, it seemed pretty straightforward. Let's eliminate wildlife criminals. Save the animals. Next step, world peace. But as I would discover, the illegal wildlife trade is far more complicated than that. And as I dug into this, it was incredible. The people connected to it range from royal families to suburban collectors, to poachers turned rangers, to rangers turned poachers, to government ministers, to activists, to people expelled from their homes for the sake of conservation. In this world, everyone has their own perspective, their own truth. Who's the bad guy and who's the good? But beyond just understanding the illegal wildlife trade, I wanted to know, how do we get this mess under control? So, from the teams at Luminary, Dream Crew, and Novel, on this season of Pull the Thread, the wildlife. This sounds intense. This sounds insane.
These bloody bastards, they shot 4 of the rhinos.
Ivory stacked everywhere.
I didn't know what it was until they told me it was a rhino horn.
The greatest rate of extinction since the time dinosaurs were wiped out.
Wildlife trade involves literally millions and millions and millions of people.
Poaching is the criminalization of poverty.
That's incredibly close though.
That was frightening. Oh my God.
The Pablo Escobar of wildlife trafficking.
They have hired 2 men to shoot me.
They can kill me anytime.
Is this war?
Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Nobody's paying attention, and these animals are disappearing.
Tarzan and Jane, that instills this sense of wanting to save wildlife. But from whom?
When we traveled to Uganda, I heard about a case. The case. Probably the most successful operation in wildlife espionage history. Investigators would talk about it the way politicians talk about Watergate. A huge, infamous event, forever cemented into their collective psyche. It's become the stuff of legend, even though how it all went down is still a bit of a mystery. People called it the Choma case, but no one really knew exactly what happened, how it all unfolded. So I wanted to pull that fuzzy outline into focus, to see in granular detail why it was so successful. Maybe then I might have a chance of wrangling this idea of the illegal wildlife trade and how it can be stopped. To find out more, I had to leave Grace's team and head down the road to a different squad of wildlife spies. They're also trying to stamp out this trade. They work for an NGO called the Natural Resource Conservation Network, And it's from that organization that this famous case, the Choma case, all kicked off.
My name is Vincent Opiene, and I'm the founder for Natural Resource Conservation Network.
Meeting him, I think Vincent wears a suit like it's a second skin, probably because suit wearing is in his blood, his dad being a former government minister. And at one point, Vincent himself was a big deal prosecutor for the Ugandan government, and probably a hop, skip, and a jump away from becoming a highly respected judge. But then he took a sharp career turn and applied to become a law enforcement warden specializing in wildlife. His dad was cool with him being a lawyer, but a lawyer for elephants?
He said, hey, so you want to come and stay in the bush here? As a lawyer, I said, I'm not coming to stay in the bush. I'm going to provide a solution to this problem.
The problem he was focused on became even clearer to him in 2013. While Vincent was working as a warden, he one day reads this article. News that Uganda was considered one of the Gang of Eight, according to CITES, which is like the UN for the wildlife trade. The Gang of Eight were the worst offending countries in the illegal trade of ivory. Why were they in the gang? Well, Uganda was seen as a place where wildlife law enforcement was lax and corruption was high. So, by lining the pockets of the right people, you could easily ship out your tusks from Uganda to their final destination in, say, Asia or the US. There, the tusks are made into decorative items, everything from chopsticks to chess sets. And Vincent, he's a former prosecutor. He's the son of a minister. He's proud of his country and didn't like it that Uganda had this reputation.
I don't want to be a party to the gang.
To solve this problem, he wanted to go after people with serious power, top dogs, corrupt government officials, as he felt this was really the way to root out wildlife crime.
I would go after highly placed people in government who are doing illegal wildlife trade. I want to move fast after them. Then somebody bigger than myself in the management would come and say, Mr. Opiene, I want to see you. You have to drop this particular case. You're going to drop this one. You're going to drop this one.
Bureaucrats were getting in Vincent's way. So Vincent basically came to the conclusion that the only way he could really get to the bottom of this was by starting his own NGO. Of course, I mean NRCN, the headquarters of which we're sitting in right now.
I said, I need to do something differently.
His NGO would function much like the government wing Grace works for. His team of undercover agents would pose as buyers, infiltrating wildlife trafficking networks and try to disrupt them from the inside out. Then they'd hand the suspects and evidence over to the police and help with prosecution. Vincent assembled his team of investigators. And intriguingly, many of his recruits were people who were small-time wildlife traffickers themselves, but were only doing it because there weren't other jobs around.
And they'll tell you, for me, I'm not happy with this. If there are other things to do, I wouldn't even get to that direction.
Then, Vincent would turn them to the light side, his side. And after a year of growing his team and his NGO, he caught wind of an intriguing target.
The first time I heard the name Bangale was about 2014.
Bangale. Vincent didn't realize it at the time, but this name would set him off on a path leading to one of the biggest wildlife investigations in history. And it wasn't just Vincent involved, because this case would end up being a global one. So, meanwhile, thousands of miles away was Cecile Neal. She was working for a massive Pan-African wildlife law enforcement network called Eagle. By the way, there are a lot of these organizations, and it kind of gets confusing. But basically, back when the name Bangale popped up, Cecile was collaborating with Vincent Opiene. While Vincent chases after traffickers on the ground in Uganda, Cecile works out of the mid-sized French city Saint-Étienne. She remotely coordinates and analyzes wildlife trafficking investigations across 7 different countries.
I'm collecting the data from all the countries, the names of the suspects, the name of the arrested people, information from their phone, from their social network.
Around 2016, Cecile saw lots of different cases appearing. But despite her brain being a hard drive for the names and faces of known traffickers and their connections, it was really confusing to her what was actually going on.
We have the knowledge on many syndicates. You can't have a clear picture of those networks. You know who is involved, but there is no clear structure.
And one of the biggest mysteries of all, those at the top. Cecile and her investigators didn't know who they were. They'd never caught one before.
It's people who are able to afford corruption on a high level and be sure that they are not going to jail.
Vincent had seen it too, like back when he was trying to investigate government ministers. Kingpins are powerful and elusive, always staying behind the scenes. But then, enter Bangalore.
We were doing our work normally as investigators of wildlife crime. And my team went to Kampala City to do an investigation. They called me and said, there's somebody who has offered to sell us some ivory.
At first, the team thought Bangalore was just some run-of-the-mill ivory dealer, one who was talking a big game about his access to illegal animal products.
For me, I have a lot. I can supply you a lot of ivory. You don't have to worry.
Vincent was curious. If what Bangalore said was true, that he had a big stash of product, he might also have big connections. But Bangalore, he was a slippery guy, a fugitive actually. After being arrested once in 2016, he was on the run in Guinea. He was living at large, thinking he'd slipped through the fingers of the police, but he was about to get caught on the hangnail of justice. Thinking he'd evaded capture, Bangalore started this deal to sell ivory. Little did he know the buyer was an undercover, working with Vincent.
So we introduced somebody new from Guinea who looked for him, got hold of him, had discussion with him.
Despite not being sure how much ivory Bangalore really has, the investigators kept talking to him, very slowly reeling him in, luring him back to Uganda where he could be arrested.
We said, come back to Uganda and we finalize the trade. We want to buy everything that you have now. So come back to Uganda.
And eventually,
it was like an evening. We got a message through WhatsApp that he has accepted to come and is coming. We were very excited. The whole team were very excited. And he came to Uganda and he accepted and said, yes, I have the product and I'm willing to take you where it is.
The location where Bangalore says the ivory is, where he thinks he's about to do a mega deal, when in reality, it's where he's about to be arrested. It's February 17th, 2017.
This is a period when you feel like you're on tension because you think anytime anything can go wrong.
It's dangerous. There was even the risk that corrupt military officers, armed men, could be working with Bangalore. But Vincent had set one of his best investigators on the job.
I'm just a simple man, born in a very rural village, brought up by a single mother. So after school, I had to join the army.
The lead investigator, who we're calling Rex.
I'm just a simple man.
A fabled guy in the world of wildlife spies. A simple man with a love for unsimple outfits, like mixing a camo print bucket hat with a houndstooth tweed blazer. And his signature, he carries how many phones?
6.
He holds them in his hand, stacked like a cell phone Jenga tower. So Rex and his collection of cell phones were deployed. He was stationed as a lookout, ready to pounce when Bangalore arrived at the house where the ivory was supposed to be. It's pretty fancy, with 5 bedrooms, a tiled roof, and sat behind a big gate. There was a whole team of people coordinating this arrest. Eagle, Natural Resource Conservation Network, and also local police.
Bangalore didn't know that there's a police officer tracking them. So they went right to the premise where the ivory is.
Bangalore strolled into the house where there's this illegal stash. He was with someone who he thought was going to buy the product. But this same person, as soon as the door slammed shut, turned to Bangalore and said,
We are here and we are investigators.
Hands up. You have the right to remain silent. The rest of the backup team, including Rex, descended on the property. The police were telling Bangalore, we're going to do a sweep of the place. Bangale's reply,
there's nothing here you are going to find. So they had to move to one bedroom. Say, can you open this bedroom? He said, no, you don't have to bother. There's nothing in this room. We don't have to open.
He refused to open. He told us he doesn't have the keys. Police now has the powers to break the master room.
Entered inside, checked. There were ivory.
19 bags packed. We opened the first bag, ivory.
They climb and check in the ceiling, there are ivory.
All the rooms are packed with ivory.
You open this room, you find ivory.
There were drums, these plastic drums.
And inside the drums?
Ivory.
You find ivory.
We got 1.3 tons.
This house was rammed with ivory. It turned out that people didn't even live in this place. It was actually like a storage and sorting facility, the ivory equivalent of an Amazon warehouse. Looking at the mound of tusks they confiscated, the team felt a pang of sadness.
I was not so happy considering the numbers of elephants that they have lost. I don't look at them in terms of my success in recovering the ivory, but I look at them in terms of the losses. I felt bad.
When we look at the ivory, we just cried because these are our animals here. When you get 1.3 ton, how many elephants are there?
2 pieces of ivory. A pair would mean 1 elephant down. So these guys had so many. They had about 360 pairs. So that would mean 360 elephants killed to meet that very demand.
The reported number of tusks at the property differ. What's doubtless is that scores of elephants suffered in order to amass this huge amount of ivory. The process for poaching an elephant often goes like this. The elephant is sometimes first shot with a rifle, or hit with poisoned arrows, or they perish after drinking from waterholes that poachers lace with cyanide. If the elephant isn't killed immediately, once it's on the ground, poachers cut the tendons of the animal to immobilize it. Sometimes they also cut off its trunk to make it bleed to death quicker. Then the tusks, which fetch thousands on the black market, would be sawed off. This would have happened to some of the elephants whose ivory was at this property.
When you happen to get kingpin, you will see a lot of kilograms and you are shocked to see all this is African animals killed.
But all this ivory maybe wasn't the biggest or most surprising discovery at this house. When Rex and the rest of the team entered, there was someone else waiting to do the deal with them. An unknown man. Someone who looks quite commanding and pious.
This is a tall guy. He has some little bit of weight.
He looks stout.
Stout, by the way, is a compliment.
He looks healthy. Somebody who is healthy has money. He looks rich.
They asked his name. The reply? Mawazu Choma.
When we arrested Choma, none of our team had heard of him. We didn't know he existed.
And then they find out that Bangalore, despite his big talk, and despite the fact he led them straight to this stash, is not running the show. In fact,
Choma is their boss.
Little did Vincent's team know, this would be one of the biggest busts of their career. Move aside Bangalore. It's Mawazu Choma that I've come to Uganda to talk about. February 2017. Vincent's agents were amazed to have accidentally snagged the boss of an ivory syndicate, Mawazu Choma. They arrested him alongside another trafficker, Bangalore. Choma was one of those powerful, shadowy figures who almost always eluded capture. Cecile was pretty staggered too.
We didn't think that we were going to jump the steps like this and go to the top.
Vincent's officers were on the ground at the property with Choma. It was literally stuffed to the rafters with ivory. But then, a handcuffed Choma allegedly turned to the officers with a proposition. Vincent and Rex heard all about it afterwards.
Gentlemen, first wait, I have something to tell you. I have some money that I'm willing to give you.
I give you money.
Take the money, go back, and enjoy yourselves.
We asked him how much money are you giving?
$50,000.
We said no.
Okay, I can step it to $100,000.
Later, he came with the last offer, 140,000 USA dollars.
140,000 US dollars. That would be hundreds of times more than most Ugandans make a month. Something like 60 years of salary to walk away and pretend this never happened.
My boss told him, no, I want you to appear in court.
Then he said, forget about it. You won't get anything out of me now. But let me tell you the secret. You have refused my $50,000. I'm going with that $50,000. I will pay 20 at the police station, and I'll pay $20,000 in court. Then the $10,000 I will give to my lawyer. I'll be out in less than 2 days.
We've reached out to Choma's lawyer for comment about these bribery allegations, as well as Choma's alleged involvement with this house full of ivory, by the way. We haven't heard back.
The numbers of wildlife products that he had was even too big for the police store. So the police themselves could not provide the storage facility for the wildlife product. I noted that this is not somebody who is small, and it's not somebody that we are going to play around with.
A truck hauled the tusks and Choma off to a special location, somewhere large enough to store his mountain of ivory. There, Vincent questioned him.
He was happy, he's talking, he's laughing, he's telling people, these are things that men have to go through. I know I will get out of it without any problem because I don't think I've done anything wrong.
His whole attitude said, nothing to worry about.
He's not even afraid. He was not remorseful at all. So that is when we started noticing that this is not a first-time offender. This is somebody who has been in this for quite a while.
His brazen attitude, his alleged bribes, his affluent stoutness, it all pointed to Choma being a huge fish. But before the arrest, neither Vincent nor Cecile, nor anyone else they were working with had ever heard of him. By now they could tell he was a boss. But how big time was this guy really? They still needed to do some digging to figure out who Mwazu Choma was exactly. Vincent's team had seized the phone, and later, after scrolling through its contents, a portrait emerged of a man who enjoyed the finer things in life.
You would see photographs of ivory, pangolin scales, people having a very lavish parties, many couples, many people with their relatives, lot of drinks, lots of food. So you would see them in those photos. When I saw the pictures, I was so surprised because I said, this guy seems to have a lot of money.
They kept scrolling and digging into Choma's activities. He appeared to have an empire of legitimate businesses too.
He was selling second-hand clothes, second-hand shoes, vehicles. So he would bring second-hand shoes from Canada, bring them in Uganda, then take them for sale in Democratic Republic of Congo. He was known as a very powerful businessman.
According to Rex, he'd be considered a billionaire in Ugandan shillings. $1 billion shillings is about $250,000 US dollars. So quite possibly a millionaire in US currency.
He wanted to be the richest among the West Africans here. He spoke that openly. He said it is only God who will take this money from him.
While this was unfolding, Cecile Neal was back in France in her quote-unquote office.
I work on the couch most of the time. My VAP on one hand and the phone on the other. I have about 50 WhatsApp groups beeping all the time.
Nestled on her sofa, she was clutching her signature camo green vape that she doesn't even let go of during interviews with podcasters.
So I can still smoke. Good.
And sitting there, surrounded by a mysterious puff of mango-flavored haze, her WhatsApp groups were blowing up as the details from Choma's arrests were sent to her.
I was super excited because it was getting more and more information, more connection, more picture of ivory, rhino horn, more pieces of paper with millions of dollars in accounting. So that was big.
We started looking at his connections with other traffickers. And we realized that, he's the one supporting other small traffickers to deal in wildlife products.
Through this, Vincent inferred that Choma was the go-to guy if you had ivory or rhino horn, like a wholesaler who would buy up products from smaller traffickers. And it was becoming clear that Choma was a link between many of the disparate cases Cecile was seeing across the region. Pretty quickly, they concluded.
Muhazu Choma was a very big trafficker. He was the biggest at the time. He was the biggest operating in Uganda at the time.
He was well-organized, the syndicate. Very well-organized. Then he started getting more networks from Asia who need these products. So he had a lot of customers in Asia. Yeah, he was a very smart guy.
Between 2012 and 2019, it said that Choma's network was responsible for trafficking at least 190 kilograms of rhino horn and at least 10 tons of elephant ivory. That's millions of dollars worth, thousands of animals. However, this is just what there's evidence for. In reality, it was probably much more. So after his arrest, Choma was sitting in a prison cell, counting down the days until his court date.
So he was taken to High Court and he applied for bail in the High Court.
Remember Choma's prediction about getting out of prison in 2 days? Well,
he was there for a week.
Then High Court granted him bail. I was so pissed. I was so annoyed. I didn't like it because we knew he could even escape.
Choma's get out of jail plan was becoming a reality.
So now, Choma is out doing business.
When we sat down to interview Rex in Uganda, he took us back to this time in 2017, when Muhazu Choma was charged with his alleged ivory trafficking and money laundering. Back then, Choma was facing years in prison or a big fine. He had gotten out on bail, but still...
he's doing a lot of illegal trade again.
Vincent knew this because he had someone on the inside, a source, a mole, telling him what Choma was up to. According to this source, Choma wasn't just out and about selling.
He kept going places, contacting very highly placed government officials to help him. And the kind of promise he was giving was a house in a location of your choice and a nice vehicle, if you are willing to take up the responsibility, helping him get out of the charges and ensuring that he does not get to the police station again.
Vincent was obsessed. As far as he was concerned, Choma was public enemy number one.
At that time, every day, we wouldn't fail to talk about him and say, he must be telling people that those guys are useless. Did you see me stay in prison? Didn't I tell them that if they refuse my bribe, they are going to fail and nothing will happen?
You know, like in one of those cop films, there's always that one scene where a group of detectives are all sitting in a war room, surrounded by leaning towers of paper, ties askew, and in the corner is a dartboard with a photo of a criminal on it. In this case, Choma's face on the bullseye. That was pretty much Vincent's life.
There was meetings all the time. Try to discuss how do we zero down and now not miss the target.
This vendetta was also becoming kind of personal for Vincent, partly because in Uganda, there's this idea of a totem. This is a strongly held tradition among the Baganda people. Kato Kintu was a king of the Baganda people in the 13th century, and apparently there was a time when animals were becoming scarce, so Kintu made the rule that some animals should be taboo to eat for certain families. This would give the animal population time to regenerate, what today would be called an indigenous form of conservation. And thus, the animal they were forbidden from eating became their totem.
your totem is so dear to you that you don't hunt it down or kill it.
For Vincent's clan,
for us in northern Uganda, and specifically the Langis of northern Uganda, we take our totem to be the rhino.
See, historically, there were loads of rhinos in Uganda. That started to change in the 1970s and 80s after the notorious dictator Idi Amin took power. With civil war raging, poachers swarmed, killing black and white rhinos for their horns, then selling them on the black market. The last wild rhino in Uganda was seen in 1983. It was killed by poachers.
So if your totem is killed and run down completely and they are no longer there in the wild, it means you're weak because you did not protect it. So in my case, my totem was hunted to extinction.
So here's Choma, not only selling ivory, but rhino horns that must have been trafficked into Uganda from across Africa. For Vincent, this is about national pride, getting Uganda off the Gang of 8 list, and familial pride, protecting his totem.
I was so sad. I said, we need to get this guy.
But there were delays in Choma's court dates. And even at some point, a new witness, someone previously declared dead, shows up and says, "I'm the owner of the ivory, not Choma," then disappears without a trace. The case was a mess.
He was on bail for almost a year. The case is going nowhere. We knew already at the High Court nothing will happen. So now, our feeling was this case cannot take off because here somebody who has money.
Even if we had to prosecute this guy here, people were going to be so lenient to him because he had the money and he was able to bribe whoever wants to say anything. That would make him get to prison.
Very frustrating. There's a crime he has committed.
All I wanted was to see him in prison, because if we allow him to use money and buy his ways out, people will keep committing this crime thinking that once you have money, you can get away with anything. I wanted him prosecuted, serve numbers of years, if possible, even life imprisonment. I want to hear that this man is behind bars.
But at this point, Choma's basically flipping off the entire justice system.
He was untouchable.
So you're probably thinking, just like I was, who can bring him down?
Your name is Wolf, right?
Why?
They call me the wolf because when I go to hunt, I hunt.
So next time on The Wildlife, the big bad wolf. The Wildlife is a Luminary original in partnership with Dream Crew, produced by Novel. It's written and hosted by me, Runako Celina. The series is reported, written, and produced by Saskia Collette, with additional production by Julian Manigera-Patton and Jaco Tajevich. The executive producers are Maithili Rao and Max O'Brien for Novel, Coral Lee for Luminary, Drake, Adele, Future, Noor, Peter Nelson and Maggie Gilbride for Dream Crew, and Mauricio Gris and Alex Farquharson for Thread Studios. Research by Madeline Parr. Sound design mixing and scoring by David Smith. And original music composed by Jake Long. Music supervision by Nicholas Alexander. Production management by Cherie Houston and Charlotte Wolfe. Fact-checking by Dania Suleiman. Jamie Lines is head of creator and content operations for Luminary.